Welcome to the Cigaretti and Butts Tobacco and Alcohol Market Report, helping investors get lots of easy money by investing in tobacco and alcohol stocks. This is Bouzeau Cigaretti. My colleague Stub E. Butts and I are unofficial spokespersons for the tobacco and alcohol industries. I'm here to encourage our listeners to invest all the money they can in tobacco stock and tell their family and friends to do the same. There is big money to be made in tobacco profits, and you deserve to get your share. Let's look at some of the challenging big tobacco has overcome so far. It helps to be lucky. We have products so satisfying, most of our customers buy some every day, even if there's a 50-50 chance our tobacco products will kill them 15 or 20 years down the road. Tobacco is so pleasurable, people will accept that death risk and not complain a bit and keep on smoking and dipping. That's why tobacco stock is such a reliable investment. Now here is another strange and lucky thing for us tobacco investors. It turns out 44% of our tobacco customers have alcohol, drug, or mental health disorders and consume 70% of all tobacco sold in the good old USA. The good news is these tobacco customers smoke more than most of the rest of our customers. That means they are the biggest single block of our tobacco customers, spend more on tobacco, and contribute to our tobacco profits in a really big way. They also pay more tobacco taxes to the federal and state governments for all the good they get out of that. The bad news is these tobacco customers who are alcoholics, drug addicts, and mentally ill die away too early. They get sick and die from lung, throat, and other cancers, emphysema, other lung disease, and heart disease, so we don't get dividend profits we would get from them if they didn't die so soon. In fact, 200,000 of them die every year from tobacco, and that is a lot of good customers to replace every year. Most of those 200,000 who die smoke a pack a day, and many of them 2 or 3 packs a day, and even more when they're drinking or doing drugs. That adds up to about $50,000 in sales from every tobacco customer lost every year. The ones who aren't dead yet spend even more when they are drinking, doing drugs, or smoking to relieve anxiety, depression, or other stress. The loss of all these paying tobacco customers would be catastrophic, except we get a new crop of beginners every year as thousands of kids discover the joys of smoking together and having fun as they look cool and attractive. Once they get nickel bonded at an early age, most of them stay nickel bonded for the rest of their lives, so our stream of tobacco profits is not affected by the 400,000 total annual deaths from tobacco. Now tell me that isn't coming the outside of a setback smelling like a rose. We lose 200,000 good customers who have alcohol, drug, or mental health problems every year and replace them with new people who also will have problems with booze, drugs, and mental illness and smoke more because of it. Here's another fabulous discovery we made. Nobody seems to see the connection between nicotine, mental health, and alcoholism and drug addiction, so nobody is focusing on tobacco as part of their treatment practices. Addiction and mental health programs are tobacco cultures, and a good thing for us and our profits that they are. Listen to this. In New York State, they found out that 90% of all the people who were admitted for addiction treatment were addicted to nicotine as well as the alcohol and drugs they came in to be treated for. It looks like there is some brain chemistry that makes some people better candidates for nickel bonding than others. The bad news for us is New York State decided to include nicotine treatment as part of their addiction treatment. The good news for us is they will probably cut the program because they've got budget problems. It's almost hilarious. Smokers and smokeless tobacco users who have alcohol and drug problems pay those high tobacco taxes to New York and the other states. Then after a state finally starts to offer nicotine treatment services and nicotine replacement products to help these people at high risk quit, the state considers shutting down these treatment programs. The politicians say there's no money to treat those who have prepaid thousands in tobacco taxes and probably deserve treatment. This seems to be the government's position, even though these nickel-bonded smokers are dying at 4 times the rate of the general public. Now, we tobacco investors don't want all these customers to die from our products, but we can't help but be pleased that state governments don't want to mess with our business and profits by focusing attention on all these tobacco deaths. The next set of challenges to our profits could also be from the loss of our best tobacco customers. They are, as already mentioned, our nickel-bonded customers who have mental health and what they now call substance use disorders. That's a fancy label for people with alcohol and drug problems. Let's consider those do-gooder associations that are supposed to advocate for what they call addiction treatment and recovery. I'm talking about the addiction treatment providers, addiction counselors, and other addiction professionals, and the National Council on Alcohol and Drug Dependence. Can you believe it? None of them consider tobacco part of what they're worried about. They don't pay attention to the research that documents that tobacco kills more alcoholics, drug addicts, and the mentally ill than alcohol, drugs, and a dozen other killers combined. It's a good thing for us tobacco investors they don't get it. Even the recovery advocacy groups don't consider tobacco to be part of what they are doing in recovery. I checked all their websites and literature, and tobacco isn't even mentioned as an issue of concern in any of them. I went to the Faces and Voices of Recovery website, and not a word about the threat of tobacco. All these addiction and mental health professionals and amateurs don't seem to understand the insanity of what they're doing. They spend lots of money and effort to get people what they call clean and sober. Then they do nothing more while these recovering people die from the nicotine addiction they ignored and didn't treat. One of these days they are going to get sued for malpractice and negligence. But we don't have to worry about the addiction and mental health providers. They are as much of the tobacco culture as their patients, so they aren't going to get in the way of our fair profits. The other challenge we know about is a do-nothing-about-tobacco approach of the 12-step programs. You know, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and the rest of them. This is another example of our good fortune as tobacco investors. Talk about a tobacco culture, those 12-steppers are the most tobacco cultured of them all. When we looked into this, we found that these programs seem to consider tobacco as an outside issue. Research indicates alcoholics and drug addicts are so nickel-bonded they are addicted to nicotine at the highest levels of all smokers and users of smokeless tobacco. This means their new members who quit drinking and drugging continue to be addicted to nicotine, or as nickel-bonded in a big way, as we like to call it. Newcomers and people coming into treatment or not coming into addiction treatment at all get sick and die at 4 times the rate of smokers in the general population, as we reported earlier, and bears repeating. Even long-time members continue to smoke or use, so they are sick and dying at about 3 times the rate of the general public, according to an article in the Join Together newsletter. So people come to their 12-step programs and learn that a belief in a higher power and the support of the group will keep them clean and sober. But they end up dying from tobacco and lose from 10 to 25 years of their expected lifespan. Talk about a strong tobacco culture. We can be grateful our tobacco investments are safe from these alcoholics and drug addicts. You know, these 12-step programs have over 1 million members in more than 170 countries, and there is no doubt at all they are effective for dealing with alcoholism and drug dependence. But the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous all died from tobacco-caused and related diseases, so they don't even have a pamphlet on tobacco and its risks for their members. The Mayo Clinic did research that showed tobacco killed more people treated for alcoholism and drug addiction than the alcohol and drugs they were treated for in their addiction treatment program. After 74 years, AA and later NA, these otherwise successful recovery programs have never addressed tobacco as a killer of up to half of their members. All I can figure out is these 12-steppers can't tell the difference between an outside issue and an inside issue. And that is very good news for our tobacco profits. Like the ostrich, may they forever keep their heads in the sand. Maybe they should use their own traditions to resolve this dilemma with a group conscience, but there is no signs that this is going to happen. As a tobacco investor, you can be sure your tobacco stocks are safe from any interference from the government and these treatment do-gooders and their so-called recovery advocates. They can't seem to see the destructive side of tobacco and don't think nicotine dependence is in what they call their scope of practice. Ever since tobacco learned how to increase nickel bonding power of nicotine by adding ingredients that improve nicotine's pleasurable effects in their products, more and more people are finding nickel bonding to be worth the risks of disease and death. As investors wanting to maximize our profits and incomes, we applaud the lack of interest and action displayed by the addiction treatment and recovery communities. May their denial and rationalizing continue for another 100 years. This is Bouzeau Cigaretti. I'll be back with more tobacco and alcohol market news and analysis. Meanwhile, puff, chew, and guzzle all you can and encourage your family and friends to do the same. Even if 200,000 Americans with mental health and addiction disorders have to die from tobacco every year, there are still huge profits for our free enterprise market economy and billions in tobacco taxes that makes life better for those of us who survive. It's a fair trade-off, don't you think? And finally, remember what the CEOs of our big tobacco companies testified under oath in Congress: nicotine is not addictive.